My name is Vivian Clarke, and I used to think success meant applause, until I realized silence could hurt more than any failure. At my father's retirement party, I was seated at the far end of a long mahogany table. My brother Gavin had just closed a seven-figure investment round and was being toasted with champagne. My mother leaned over to his fiancé and said, "We always knew Gavin would carry the family name with pride." Then she looked at me and added, "Vivian, well, she's doing something with schools, I think. Volunteer work, maybe?" Someone turned to me, politely puzzled. "You have an MBA, don't you? Why aren't you in banking like the rest of them?" I smiled. I've learned to smile through moments like that. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I wasn't just building schools. I was rebuilding futures, quietly, steadily, without a cent of family money. So imagine their faces when a few months later, the wealthiest man in the room stood up and said, "I've invested in hundreds of companies, but she's the only person I trust with my entire fortune." That was the day they stopped calling me a failure. But by then, I no longer needed their approval. I wasn't always the outsider. Growing up, I used to think I was just like everyone else in my family, driven, curious, determined to make a difference. But somewhere along the way, their definition of making a difference became smaller, narrower, and centered around one thing: money. And I veered off the chart. After I graduated from Harvard Business School, I landed a position at one of the top investment firms in Boston. My father was proud, or at least he said so in the way dads like him do, with a firm handshake and a nod across the dinner table. My mother boasted about it at book club. Gavin, my older brother, joked that I was finally on the grid. Back then, I thought I had arrived, but everything changed after a trip to Arizona. It was supposed to be a weekend volunteering with an education nonprofit. A friend invited me last minute, and I tagged along out of curiosity. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Children sharing tattered textbooks, teachers working double shifts, families trying to homeschool by flashlight because the power kept cutting out. I flew back to Boston, walked into my pristine office on the 34th floor, and felt sick. That week, I turned in my resignation. When I told my family, they thought I was having a breakdown. "You gave up 6 figures for..." "What, tutoring?" Gavin laughed, thinking it was a phase. My mother looked genuinely frightened and offered to call one of her friends, who specialized in career burnout recovery. My father said, "You're too smart to throw your life away." But I didn't feel like I was throwing anything away. For the first time, I felt like I was building something real. I moved into a tiny studio apartment and used my savings to lease a single classroom in a rundown building in Nevada. It started small, just 5 students, some borrowed desks, and a curriculum I cobbled together at night. I called it the Horizon Project. I wasn't naive. I knew there were 1,000 ways to fail, and some days I came close. Grants fell through, the plumbing broke. I once taught a full week with the flu because I couldn't afford a substitute. But every time a student passed their GED, or told me they finally understood fractions, or simply showed up, every time I knew I was doing the right thing. Still, none of that mattered to my family. To them, I was the daughter who left Wall Street to play teacher. When relatives asked about me during the holidays, my mother would say, "Oh, Vivian? She's off doing something charitable, bless her heart." My father stopped asking entirely. And Gavin? Well, Gavin built his own company and made sure everyone knew it. At family dinners, he talked about market shares and IPOs while I quietly passed the rolls. No one asked me what I was working on. No one ever asked if I needed help. They didn't see my work as work. They saw it as failure in disguise. It didn't matter that I'd opened a second center in New Mexico, or that I'd been invited to speak at education conferences, or that alumni from my program were now in college. In their eyes, success had a uniform: tailored suits, leather briefcases, private equity portfolios, and I'd taken mine off. But I wasn't bitter, not yet, just tired. Tired of defending my choices to people who had never asked why I made them in the first place. Tired of pretending I didn't care when they looked right through me. Still, I kept going, because even when the world doesn't clap for you, the work doesn't stop. And one day, though I didn't know it yet, the right person would see it. It was my father's 70th birthday when things reached a breaking point. The whole family was there. Extended cousins, old business partners, neighbors who still thought we were the perfect Clarke family. Gavin had offered to host the event at his newly renovated penthouse overlooking the river. Everything was crisp, cold, expensive. I almost didn't go, but my mother insisted. Just show up, Vivian. Be present. No speeches, no causes tonight, please. It's about your father. I wore the only dress in my closet that still passed for formal. When I arrived, the valet hesitated, unsure whether I was staff or a guest. That should have been my first clue. Inside, everything smelled like validation. Imported florals, aged whiskey, polished floors. Gavin was already in full performance mode, giving a toast about Dad's legacy in finance and how he hoped to carry it forward through his new tech fund. Everyone clapped, laughed, nodded. I stood near the bar, nursing sparkling water. Then I saw it, my name, listed on the printed itinerary near the bottom. Vivian Clarke. Community segment. I blinked. Community segment? Before I could ask, my mother appeared at my side. We thought it'd be nice to include a little something from your world. Just don't make it too heavy, okay? People are here to celebrate. That your world stung more than I expected. Still, I nodded. I always nodded. When it was my turn, they handed me a microphone with all the gravity of a novelty toy. I spoke briefly, just 2 minutes, about how education has ripple effects far beyond test scores. I mentioned a student named Emilio, who, thanks to our center, had recently passed his GED and now interned at a city office. Polite applause. Someone coughed. Gavin cleared his throat loudly. Then he took the mic back and joked, "Well, if any of you want to feel morally superior and financially bankrupt, my sister's doing sign-ups outside." Laughter erupted. I smiled. That same practiced smile. But I could feel the blood rushing to my ears. Afterward, a man in a sharp blue suit approached me by the cheese display. "You know, I love what you're doing. My wife runs a dog rescue. Same kind of vibe. Pure heart, no cash flow. Admirable, really." He meant well. They always did. I stepped outside for air, clutching my clutch like it was holding my dignity together. That's when I heard it. Through the cracked window, my mother's voice. She means well, but let's be honest, Vivian was always a little too idealistic. Gavin, at least, understands how the world works. And then my father. She's not a failure, she just doesn't need to be on stage. Let her do her thing quietly. It doesn't hurt anyone. It doesn't hurt anyone. They said it like I was some sentimental sideshow, like I hadn't spent 10 years keeping children out of prison, keeping families intact, keeping futures alive. Later that evening, while people clinked glasses and debated market trends, I stood by the window and looked out at the city I once thought I'd conquer. And I felt small. Not because I was failing, but because the people who should have known me best never once asked what victory looked like in my world. It wasn't yachts or headlines. It was safety, literacy, a child not dropping out, a teenage girl saying, "Miss Clarke, I didn't think I mattered until I got here." But none of that would ever make the family slideshow, so I smiled, said my goodbyes, and left before dessert. That night, in the quiet of my apartment, I cried. Not because I regretted my choices, but because I was invisible to the people whose love I had stopped needing, but never stopped hoping for. 2 weeks later, I hosted a quiet 10-year anniversary dinner for the Horizon Project. Nothing fancy, just folding tables beneath string lights, local produce on borrowed plates, and a room full of people who knew what it meant to fight for a second chance. We held it in Las Cruces, New Mexico, where we'd just opened our third learning center. The local community had been incredible. Parents brought homemade dishes, students decorated the space with paper flowers, and one teenager even performed a spoken word poem about the first time he read a book all the way through. There were no investors there, no cameras, no PR team, just stories, just people, just impact. I was in the back, helping refill pitchers of lemonade, when one of our volunteers pulled me aside. "There's a guest here asking for you. Says he doesn't want to interrupt, but he's been sitting near the back for a while now." I made my way through the crowd and saw him. a tall, silver-haired man in a dark sweater and worn shoes. He looked out of place in the best way. Observant, quiet, and not performing for anyone. "Miss Clarke?" he asked, extending a hand. "I'm Paul Edgemont." I froze. Everyone in finance knew that name. He was a legendary investor. Tech, biotech, aerospace. Worth billions. But no headlines for years. Some said he retired early after losing his only son in an accident. Others said he'd simply vanished, disillusioned. "I heard about your work from someone who volunteers in Phoenix," he continued. "I didn't want to call or schedule anything formal. I just wanted to see it for myself." I offered him a seat and a plate, but he'd already eaten. The food was excellent, and the conversation even better. He smiled gently. We sat under the stars and talked. Not about returns or market share, but about systems, about dignity, about what it means to teach someone that they matter. He told me about his son, Michael, who'd struggled with depression and had dropped out of school before the accident. "I had all the resources in the world," he said, "but I didn't know what he needed. I kept investing in products. I should have invested in people." I didn't say much. I just listened. And maybe that's why he kept talking. Before he left, he handed me a card. No logo, no fancy design, just his name and a number. "Call me," he said. "I don't know exactly what I can offer yet, but I believe in what you're doing, and I'd like to be part of it." I watched him walk away into the night, a silhouette of quiet power. The next day I called. We spoke again, this time about structure, growth, and what it would take to scale the Horizon project without losing its soul. He didn't talk over me. He didn't question my judgment. He didn't ask who else was backing me. He asked what I needed to protect the heart of my mission. Weeks passed. Then came the moment I never expected. An email from his team proposing the establishment of a new national foundation, one that would expand our work across 10 underserved states. He wanted me to lead it, fully, autonomously, with backing. The only condition? "You don't change who you are," he wrote. I sat alone in my kitchen, phone in hand, staring at the screen. Not because I doubted it, but because for the first time in my life, someone powerful didn't try to fix me. He simply saw me. And for a woman who had been invisible at her own family's table, that was everything. It was Gavin's big night. He had organized an exclusive investment gala at the Conrad Hotel downtown. Private guest list, black tie only, every table sponsored by a venture capital firm or family office. My mother called to invite me, reluctantly, as if crossing off a social obligation. "Just show up for an hour," she said. "Don't talk about Horizon. Gavin's put a lot into this." I almost declined. But then I remembered something Paul had told me a week earlier over coffee. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room carries the most weight, especially when no one expects it to speak. So I said yes. When I arrived, heads turned, not because they recognized me, but because I didn't match. My dress was elegant, but understated. No diamonds, no designer clutch. Just me. Gavin was in full command, working the room, shaking hands, dropping terms like growth equity and future-forward disruption. My mother beamed beside him like a campaign wife. As I walked toward my seat, someone caught my arm. "Vivian," a low voice said. It was Paul. He was wearing a simple navy suit. No entourage, just presence. "I hope you don't mind," he said with a small smile. "I decided to attend, thought it might be educational." I blinked. "You got on Gavin's guest list?" He smiled wider. "Vivian, when you control 40% of the fund hosting the evening, you don't ask for a guest list." My heart skipped. We sat together near the back, unnoticed, until the keynote. Gavin took the stage with his signature grin. He welcomed the crowd, thanked donors, and began his polished pitch about his new fintech platform aimed at disrupting legacy education inefficiencies. I stiffened. His slides included terms like scalable microlearning and outcome-based social impact. But he'd never taught a student, never visited a school that ran without heat. Still, the crowd nodded. Money likes mirrors. Then Gavin introduced what he called the Legacy Leadership Initiative, a program to honor the next generation of bold philanthropic visionaries. And tonight, he said, we are proud to welcome our newest partner in purpose, Mr. Paul Edgemont. The room erupted. Applause, flashes, cameras swiveled. Paul stood slowly and made his way to the front. Gavin gestured toward the podium, clearly expecting a short thank you and maybe a nod to the partnership. Instead, Paul adjusted the microphone and said, "Thank you, Gavin, for the introduction. But I'd like to clarify something." The room hushed. "I didn't come tonight to endorse a startup. I came to speak about trust." He paused. Let the silence settle. In my years of investing, I've partnered with brilliant minds, but brilliance is common. What's rare is integrity, and what's rarer still, conviction without ego. He turned, looked straight at me. And so tonight, I want to publicly share a decision that has been private until now. My breath caught. I'm establishing the Edgemont Future Foundation with an endowment of $820 million, and I have chosen Vivian Clarke to lead it, entirely, autonomously. I trust her, with my fortune, with my name, and with a vision this world desperately needs. Gasps, murmurs. A few camera flashes. My mother's face paled. Gavin's jaw tightened. Paul continued. Vivian didn't pitch me. She didn't ask for $1. I found her, because real leaders don't need a spotlight. They build something so solid, so human, that it draws the right people on its own. He walked down from the stage, returned to his seat beside me, and whispered, "You don't owe them an explanation. Just keep building." I couldn't speak, not from shock, but from the overwhelming quiet inside me, the kind of peace that only comes when you've been seen, truly seen, for the first time. They didn't clap for me that night. Not all of them. But I didn't need applause. Because I'd already won the only thing I ever truly wanted, respect. After the gala, the headlines came fast. Edgemont taps Vivian Clarke to lead $800 million education fund. From overlooked to trusted, the rise of a quiet reformer. I declined interviews, turned down speaking gigs. I wasn't building a public profile. I was building trust, teams, and classrooms. The foundation opened its main office in Santa Fe. I stayed close to the work. The Horizon project grew fast. 4 new centers, a student wellness program, over 1,000 diplomas earned in year 1. Then one morning, a letter arrived. My mother's handwriting. It was brief, a few lines. She apologized for not asking more questions, for assuming too much, for saying things that cut deeper than she knew. "You weren't the failure," she wrote. "We just didn't see your kind of success." A week later, she came to visit one of our learning centers. She sat quietly in the back while a student gave a presentation on climate justice. She didn't speak much afterwards, but her eyes said enough. Months later, Gavin called. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. Civil, measured, no apology. And I didn't expect one. Healing didn't come wrapped in apologies. It came in letting go, of old narratives, of needing closure, of needing them to change before I moved on. One afternoon in Austin, I was painting a mural with our students when a young girl tugged my sleeve. She handed me a drawing, me with a book cape. She'd written, "Thank you for building a place where I feel real." That's what I framed. Not the Harvard degree, not the headlines. Just that. Because that was the point all along. These days, I show up to some family gatherings. I don't arrive to prove anything. I don't leave with disappointment. I just exist, fully myself. Last Christmas, Gavin introduced me to one of his colleagues. "She's the one running that education foundation," he said. "Started it from scratch. It's kind of brilliant." He didn't mean it as a surprise anymore, just as truth. I spent years craving their recognition. I don't anymore. Forgiveness, for me, isn't forgetting. It's remembering gently, letting the past be the past, without letting it define me. It's being done explaining who I am, letting them shift if they ever do, and letting myself stay still. Maybe I failed in their eyes. Maybe I didn't earn fast enough or shine loud enough. But I didn't fail in mine, and someone saw that. Someone who didn't need me to be perfect, just honest, relentless, and rooted in something real. He trusted me with everything. And in that trust, I found something I'd chased my whole life: peace.